Hey everybody, it's Amanda. This is going to be a continuation of my previous for loop video. However, this is going to contain user entry, which I did not include in my last video. And we're going to start out with a const that is size assigned to 10. And it's going to ask us for a number, then it's going to display the number, and then it's going to ask us for another number. So let's go ahead and run the program. I'm going to enter a number. As you can see, it's displayed 10 times. If we counted it, I can show you later. However, we're going to continue. It's going to keep asking me for a number. As you can see, the number is switching each time. It's saying enter another number. I entered in another number. The number entered is 4, and then I keep displaying. However, if you enter in a ridiculously long number, as you can see, the result changes to this number, and that is because that's the maximum amount that the integer data type can hold. There are different integer data types. We're not going to discuss that today. We are discussing for loops with user entry. Going on to write the program, I'm going to declare a const just because I used it in my example video. So I'm going to call it size, and I'm going to assign it 10. After, I'm going to declare a integer variable called number. I'm going to ask the user for a number. Followed by an endbill, and then I'm going to cin that number. Going to my for loop now, as I shown in my example again, I'm going to use my local variable inside of my for loop scope. So I have my integer declared, or integer named I, which is usually to indicate the index, which is assigned 0. So I is less than, I use size for my comparison, and I'm going to increment it until it reaches the size. So as you can see here, I'm going to display the number. However, this time I'm going to add an endbill. And I'll go ahead and add an endbill here too. So clear my screen, let's run my program. Enter a number. As you can see, it displays 10 times. In my example, it was all jumbled together. That's because I didn't have an endbill in my example that I shown you. If I wanted to make it even more clear, in my previous example, you saw I used the integer I plus 1. Then I could do this, and it would show you how many elements are going to display, and it's going to be 1 through 10. As you can see, I have 1 through 10, and the same number that I entered was 2. If I entered in a different number, first it's going to display the different number, unless I go out of that, ridiculously long range. You got to keep that in mind. Going to my next example, so as you can see here, I have my local variable inside my main, and I have access to that variable inside of my for loop as well. If I wanted to, I can declare another variable just to make sure that it doesn't get changed. However, if I wanted to reuse the variable, I could as well. It depends on what you want to do with your program. So right now I'm going to go ahead and add an endbill, and then I'm going to go into my next for loop. Again, I can reuse this variable because it's inside of my for loop. It's not going to exist outside of my for loop. I'm going to use my size again, and again, I'm going to use my prefix notation. Inside of my for loop, instead of reusing the variable, I'm going to create a local variable inside of my for loop that my for loop only has access to. So here I'm going to do the same thing I did up here. I'll just go ahead and copy this. enter another number. I'm going to do an endbill. I'm going to see in the number, which is called num in this case. I'm going to do another endbill, followed by the number, what the number was entered. And that should be good. So let's go ahead and run the program. As you can see, it says enter a number. I'm going to enter in 2 for the same example. So I have 2, enter another number, I have 4. The number entered in is 4, and you can see it's going to do this 10 times until I get to 10. And then it displays each number each time. I went ahead and removed my endbills just to make it a little bit more clear when it's displaying the code, just an FYI. However, this is a very basic example, and it leaves a lot of room for error. So these are things to keep in the back of your mind as a beginner programmer. Basically, you want to make sure that you can write code that is not going to produce errors. In this case, this code would produce errors, and I'll show you why. So if we wanted to run the program for my first number, so assuming I wanted somebody to enter a positive number, say they accidentally entered a negative number, it allows them to enter a negative number. So say I entered in now a decimal number, it's going to exit because it's not of that data type. However, if I entered in a string, it's going to give me a number, and it's going to give me a negative number. So it's still going to allow me to enter in a string into my integer data type, and that's not good. So these are things to keep in mind when you're programming. As always, I created some terms to look up and some notes from the video. So we discussed that there are additional C++ data types as well as new integer data types. We talked a little bit about local scope. Nothing about global scope in this video, however, is something for you to look into. For loops, there is not only one way to use for loops or create for loops. In this case, we use count controlled for loops. However, there are additional ways to use a for loop. We have relational operators for you to look into and equality operators. Keep in mind that you want to write code that will not break. So test your code consistently and make sure that it's not going to break. These are things to keep in the back of your mind, not just feel like, oh, hey, look, I asked for a number. I know how to display a number. That's great. But you can't rely on user entry. And that is something for you to look into and keep in the back of your mind consistently, that you're always looking for something that can potentially break your code, and you want to know how to use it correctly too. If you like this video, please subscribe, share, like the video, and I hope everybody has a great day. Thanks for your time.